I was the wife of Christopher Evans, the childhood sweetheart, who had been tied to me for more than a decade. People always said we were destined, that we had been molded together by time and by the bond of two powerful families in Kansas City. But on that night when knives gleamed under the broken light of the abandoned warehouse, and masked men demanded he choose between me and Olivia Parker, his mistress, he did not hesitate. He chose her. In that instant, something inside me shattered, and yet from the rubble of heartbreak rose a voice I did not know I possessed. The kidnappers had their blades raised, ready to slice down at me. I screamed with all the fury that betrayal can birth, daring the leader to turn the knife on Olivia. My words stunned them all. The kidnappers, Christopher, even Olivia herself, froze, their eyes wide, as if I had transformed before them. I was no longer the trembling wife, the quiet partner who had always believed in love's promises. I was a queen of rage, commanding the stage like I owned it. I looked straight at the man with the knife, my voice sharp as steel. "Do you not see?" I told him. "Christopher does not care for me. Killing me brings you nothing. But her, the woman he treasures, she is worth everything he owns. Hurt her, and he will empty his fortune into your hands. She is the key to his loyalty. Not meaningless words burned my throat, but gave me power." Olivia trembled in her perfect white blouse and pencil skirt, her corporate armor now drenched in fear. I wore a flowing white dress that once made me look like a princess at the gala, but now it clung to me as I screamed like a woman possessed. My face flushed with rage, my voice carried through the warehouse like thunder, and I no longer resembled a victim. I had become a storm. The leader, cornered by Christopher's betrayals in the past, hesitated. His eyes flicked between me and Christopher, measuring my words. To everyone's shock, he untied me, shoved a knife into my hands, and stepped back with cautious respect. For a moment, he thought I might be one of his own, a partner in crime, rather than a hostage. I did not waste that moment. I slashed the blade across Olivia's thigh, watching blood spill and hearing her shriek echo against the concrete walls. Christopher's face twisted into disbelief, his eyes blazing red. The man who had once whispered sweet vows to me now screamed as if I had destroyed his entire world. "Rebecca, stop! Don't you dare hurt her!" His voice cracked, full of a desperate madness. If not for the guns aimed by the kidnappers and the knife in my hand, he would have charged at me, ripped the blade away, and cradled Olivia like a wounded goddess. I glared back at him, my hands steady, even though my heart shook with anguish. "You told me there was nothing between you and her," I shouted. "You promised we would build a life together. And now, in the moment when I needed you most, you left me to die for her. You betrayed every word you ever spoke." Christopher dropped to his knees, his face a mask of torment. Yet all I saw was cowardice. "Rebecca, please," he begged, but his pleas only fueled my fury. I pressed the knife closer to Olivia's bloody leg and screamed, my voice raw with rage and heartbreak. "You chose her over me, Christopher. You let me face death alone. Why should I show her mercy when you showed me none?" The air grew heavy with the sound of Olivia's sobs, Christopher's desperate cries, and the silence of the kidnappers who seemed to enjoy the twisted theater unfolding before them. I felt unhinged, yes, but in that madness there was a clarity I had never known. I was the one in control. For the first time in my life, I held the power that Christopher and Olivia thought belonged only to them. My mind raced back through the years, through the summers, when our families vacationed together in Colorado, through the countless dinners where my parents and his plotted business deals, over wine smiling at us like we were already husband and wife, from childhood games in suburban streets, to high school dances, from college study sessions to the day we stood together at the altar. My life had always been braided with his. We were never given a choice. We were raised to believe we belonged to each other. When we finally married in our 20s, everyone celebrated as if the city itself had been waiting for that union. Our family's fortunes grew stronger. Our futures seemed intertwined with promise, and because we had known only each other, we believed that was enough. I thought we were love, though perhaps it had only been convenience. Yet in my heart there had never been room for another man. I gave him everything, trusted him with every breath, and believed he would never betray me. But barely a year into our marriage, when I began to dream about children, he gave his heart and his hands to Olivia. I will never forget the day I found out. Rain poured across Kansas City streets, gleaming with water, while I hurried to a cafe downtown to bring Christopher a file I had risked everything to obtain from a rival firm. Through the glass window, I saw him. He was seated comfortably, one arm wrapped around Olivia, the other teasing her lips with his finger. The look on his face was not the mask of business, not a casual gesture. It was intimacy. It was desire. It was betrayal staring me in the face. I had stood frozen in the rain, clutching the folder to my chest, as if it could protect me from the truth. In that moment, I realized that the man I thought I knew better than anyone else had chosen someone else to laugh with, to confide in, to touch with tenderness. And still I clung to denial, believing his lies when he swore it meant nothing, when he promised me she was just an assistant, when he looked at me with those familiar eyes and tried to convince me I was his only one. But that night in the warehouse stripped every illusion bare. Under the threat of death, there is no room for lies. When forced to choose, he did not choose me. He chose Olivia. The girl who came into our lives as a secretary had become the center of his world, while I, the wife, bound to him by bloodlines and history, was discarded like an afterthought. My hands trembled, my heart broke into shards, and yet I lifted my chin and roared into the night, refusing to be the silent victim. If I was going to lose everything, then I would take back the dignity he had stolen. My fury painted me as a mad woman, but I no longer cared. Better a mad woman with a blade than a quiet wife waiting to die. The sight burned itself into my memory. Christopher sat there in the corner of that downtown cafe, his wedding band glinting under the dim light, and Olivia Parker's tongue sliding across it, as if claiming him in front of the world. To anyone else, they looked like a married couple lost in affection. But to me, it was like staring at a grotesque reflection of what had once been mine. If I covered Olivia's face, the scene was painfully familiar, the same intimacy Christopher used to share with me. My stomach churned and bile rose when I looked down at my own wedding ring, realizing how cruelly meaningless it had become. My love for him drained away like water spilling from a cracked glass. There was no way to gather it back. Christopher froze when he realized I was standing there, shock spreading across his face, yet we were adults, and pride kept us from tearing each other apart in public. We walked out in silence, but the storm waited until we were behind closed doors. At home, he fell to his knees, this tall man, who had once seemed unbreakable, now sobbing like a child. He begged for forgiveness, swearing it had been a moment of weakness, insisting that his heart still belonged to me, and that nothing had gone beyond a line with Olivia. His tears stained the floor, but they could not wash away the image I had seen. My hands shook as I threw the photographs I had received from the private investigator into his lap. They were not many, but they were damning enough images of him with Olivia in foreign cities, under the guise of business trips, proof that their secret affair had stretched for months. He had promoted her from assistant to his private secretary. Half a year earlier, and that was when it all began. They had used the cover of conferences and negotiations abroad to indulge in their secret. What cut deepest was the memory of the very first night of their affair. That same night, Christopher had called me on video, speaking excitedly about designing a nursery for the child we had planned to have. He had looked into the camera with warmth in his eyes, while Olivia waited in the shadows of a hotel room. That duplicity still burned me like acid. I told myself I would divorce him, but divorce was not simple in our world. Our families had been bound together for generations, business intertwined so deeply that a separation would rip through contracts, projects, and fortunes. Both families treated us as one unit, and to tear it apart would cost more than either side was willing to lose. My parents scolded him for his shameless betrayal, yet they too hesitated, urging me to forgive for the sake of stability. His parents offered me nearly everything: shares, assets, influence, as if material compensation could cleanse humiliation. If it were only between Christopher and me, I would have walked away without looking back. But the weight of two families pressing down kept me trapped in a cage I no longer wanted. So we continued our charade. In public, we were still the perfect couple, our smiles rehearsed, our hands entwined. At events, we played the part expected of us, though in private, I slept facing away from him, my heart stone cold. Tonight was another charity gala, one more performance under the glittering lights of Kansas City society. I never expected Olivia to appear, but there she was, no longer his secretary, now standing tall as the assistant to another corporate executive. She wore a new dress and a new title, but her eyes sought Christopher like iron to a magnet. He did not meet her gaze, his face calm as if she no longer existed. When his eyes turned to me, however, he smiled with practiced gentleness. "Rebecca," he whispered, "I promised you I would never make that mistake again. There is nothing between us anymore. Please do not divorce me. Give me another chance, and we will be happy again." His voice was soft, but it no longer reached me. The moment I looked at him, all I could see was Olivia's lips on his wedding ring, his hand curled around her waist, their laughter behind my back. Even if he had exiled her from his company, even if he swore fidelity, those memories were carved into my mind with fire. Every tender word became a dagger. Every smile reminded me of his betrayal. I began to pull away in every sense, not only from him, but from his family, cutting cords of affection one by one. I refused to become the woman who lived shackled by suspicion, who smiled in public, but bled in private. I did not want to wake each day wondering where his eyes wandered, whose name he whispered when I was not there. Halfway through the gala, fatigue overtook me, the weight of pretense suffocating. I excused myself early, telling him I was unwell. The night air was cold as I slipped into the waiting car, but the chill that struck me had nothing to do with the weather. The driver was unfamiliar. Before I could react, a cloth pressed against my face, a sharp scent filled my lungs, and darkness swallowed me whole. When I awoke, my wrists and ankles were bound ropes biting into my skin. I hung suspended in the air like some butchered prize, and across from me, Olivia dangled in the same cruel position. Her eyes were wide with terror, her mascara streaked down her cheeks, but I felt no sympathy. The room smelled of rust and gasoline shadows stretching across the walls of an abandoned warehouse in downtown Kansas City. The leader stood before us, his voice sharp as he spoke into a phone. "Christopher Evans," he growled, "your wife and your mistress are in my hands. I know you keep $30 million in cash in your company's vault. Bring it to Warehouse 30. One hand delivers the money, the other takes them back. But listen well, if you dare call the police, I will kill them both and then come for you." I recognized his voice, twisted with rage but familiar. It was not a stranger's. It was Victor Hayes, the ruthless CEO of Titan Holdings, a man Christopher had crossed one time too many. He was no petty criminal, but a man with power and nothing left to lose. And now he had both me and Olivia tied up like trophies, bargaining chips to break Christopher once and for all. I closed my eyes for a moment, a bitter laugh bubbling inside me. So this was my life now, dangling between a husband who betrayed me, a mistress who had taken what was mine, and an enemy who wanted to use us as weapons. I had once dreamed of love, of children, of a family built on trust. Instead, I had been delivered into a nightmare where the only way to survive might be to join hands with the very enemy Christopher feared most. Victor Hayes had once been the golden heir of Titan Holdings, inheriting the empire from his father with the kind of arrogance only a man born into privilege could carry. Yet arrogance alone could not shield him from betrayal. Christopher Evans, once his closest friend, had allied with cunning shareholders to crush him, manipulating the stock market and stripping Titan of its power. They cornered him, forced him to sell at a loss, and when the dust settled, he was ousted, burdened with debts he could never repay. The man who had been raised to rule was thrown into ruin, and he carried that humiliation like a wound that never healed. His fury burned, and all of it was directed at Christopher. I had begged Christopher not to push Victor too far. I told him that winning at all costs would create enemies who would never forget. But Christopher only laughed, repeating that success crowns the victor and failure damns the defeated. He said there was no morality in the game of power, only those who rise and those who fall. That day I saw a side of him I could not reach, a man who believed betrayal was just another tool of business. Now the past had returned in blood and chains. Victor's revenge dragged me, an innocent wife, into the center of it. I stared at him from where I was tied and forced a bitter laugh. Victor, I said you gain nothing by taking me. Christopher and I are finished. I am just a secretary now, a forgotten wife. He will not care if I die. Olivia's voice was calm, her tone practiced like the actress she had become. The woman Christopher loves has always been Miss Rebecca, she said softly. I was only a mistake, nothing more than a distraction. Her eyes glistened, her lips trembled, and she looked every bit the tragic mistress abandoned by a heartless man. But her words struck me like knives. She kept painting me as the beloved wife, as if to push Victor's rage toward me, as if my suffering would prove her innocence. Victor's eyes gleamed with something darker than greed. Money was meaningless to him now. What he wanted was vengeance, to see Christopher's empire crumble as his had. If ransom were his only goal, he would have already called my parents, demanded cash and shares. But he wanted something far crueler. He wanted Christopher to suffer. Then, without warning, Victor slapped Olivia so hard her head whipped to the side. She gasped, stunned, her cheek red and swelling. His voice cracked like thunder. Enough! If he truly loved Rebecca, would you even exist? He wanted both of you. He wanted everything. You were never love. You were convenience. His words, harsh and raw, cut to the truth I had tried to deny. Real love does not invite a third. Real love does not betray. Christopher's claim that he still loved me was nothing more than a cruel illusion. The warehouse door burst open. Christopher arrived, his eyes blazing, when he saw the mark Victor's hand had left on Olivia's face. Victor, stop this, he shouted, fury trembling in his voice. Olivia sobbed dramatically. Christopher, it hurts. Please help me, her expression pitiful, perfectly crafted to pierce a man's heart. Victor smirked, savoring the spectacle. He motioned for Christopher to throw over the duffel bags of cash. After counting with ruthless precision, he set them aside and walked between us, circling like a predator, enjoying the scent of fear. He grabbed both me and Olivia, pulling us roughly against him, kissing and groping as if to prove he owned us both. My skin crawled, bile rising in my throat, but I refused to cry. I changed my mind. Victor hissed, his voice hot with malice. I want the money and the women. You can take one home, Christopher. The other I will send to hell. His hand pressed hard against my chest, then Olivia's, as if daring him to choose. His meaning was clear. One would live, the other would be destroyed. My blood turned to ice. Olivia screamed, her tears soaking the gag around her mouth. Victor lifted a knife, the blade catching the flicker of the warehouse light, and with deliberate cruelty he slashed across our skin, leaving crimson trails that stung and burned. Pain radiated through me and terror clawed at my chest. Olivia wailed, her voice shrill and desperate. Christopher, save me, please, if you love me. Don't let me die. Christopher's face twisted in agony, veins bulging in his neck. His fists clenched. He looked at me with guilt so raw it nearly broke me. But when Victor demanded his decision, when the knife hovered ready to strike again, Christopher raised a shaking hand and pointed. His voice cracked, echoing off the walls. I choose Olivia. The words pierced me deeper than the knife ever could. My vision blurred as tears spilled down my cheeks, a sob tearing through my throat. He had grown up with me, married me, promised to build a life by my side. And in the moment of life and death, he gave me away like I was nothing. He chose a woman he had known less than a year over the wife who had shared his entire life. The cruelty of it crushed me. Why was I the one condemned to die for his sins? Why was I to pay the price of his betrayal? Fury rose in me, wild and untamed. In that moment, something inside me broke free. I stopped being the victim. My voice roared across the warehouse, shocking even Victor. "Christopher Evans, get on your knees," I screamed, my throat raw. "Bark like the dog you are. Crawl and beg like the coward you've always been." Victor froze, then laughed, amused by my transformation. Olivia stared at me, stunned, as my hand cracked across her face. "Look at him," I snarled. "This is the man you risked everything for. A selfish, vile man who will let his wife and mistress bleed for his pride, rather than beg for their lives." Christopher stared at me, his eyes filled with shame, fury, and something else, fear. I had been his gentle wife, his quiet companion. But here in this warehouse, dripping with blood and betrayal, I had become something else entirely. I was no longer the woman he thought he could control. I was rage incarnate, and I would not die quietly. Olivia Parker's eyes darted toward Christopher Evans, silently begging him to protect her, unwilling to gamble her life in this nightmare. She had always played the fragile one, leaning on men for salvation, and now her act was bleeding through in real terror. Christopher, who had grown up with every luxury, who had been the golden heir untouched by hardship, stood frozen as Victor Hayes aimed a gun at him. His face twisted with humiliation, with disbelief that anyone would dare strip away the aura of power he had always carried. For the first time I saw him trembling, and strangely it filled me with both sorrow and a dark satisfaction. Christopher loved himself above all else. He could bear me bleeding, Olivia screaming, but the thought of his own skin being cut, his own body humiliated, was unbearable. I spat bitter words at Victor, my voice sharp with fury. "You have the knife and the gun. Tie him up, beat him, demand more ransom, make him pay for everything he's done." Christopher's face drained of color as Victor's mouth curled into a savage grin. He raised the gun, walked slowly toward Christopher, and whispered with poisonous delight, "Well then, Mr. Evans, from this moment you belong to me. We are all adults. There are things that need no explanation." Christopher's composure cracked. As Victor ripped off his jacket and shoved him hard against the floor, his body shook with panic. He tried to twist away, tried to crawl, but Victor's strength was merciless. The sound of fabric tearing filled the warehouse, and in an instant, Christopher's pride, his polished mask, his carefully crafted image was torn apart. The sight of him pinned beneath Victor, humiliated and powerless, was grotesque, almost surreal. Olivia gagged violently, vomiting at the sight, her sobs mixing with retching. For a moment I considered shutting my eyes, but then I caught a flicker of movement at the door. Shadows slipped and the sound of boots muffled on concrete. Rescue! The police were here. My mind, sharpened by fury and heartbreak, seized the opportunity. I grabbed the blade near my ropes, cut Olivia free, and shoved her. She fell directly into the pool of her own vomit, her heels slipping, her dress ruined. Her cries turned to another wave of nausea, leaving her heaving and helpless. I had no time for pity. With a guttural cry, I lunged forward, knife in hand, charging at Victor. "Let him go, Victor. If you want blood, take mine." My voice ripped through the chaos. Olivia shrieked. Christopher thrashed beneath Victor, and then the crack of a gunshot split the air. Victor collapsed, his body jerking as a bullet tore through him. Armed officers stormed the warehouse, shouting commands, flashlights blazing against the dark walls. I dropped the knife immediately, letting it clatter across the floor. My legs buckled, and I stumbled into the arms of a female officer, sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank God you came," I cried, my voice breaking. "I thought I would die here tonight." Victor's body convulsed, his rage spilling into one final grotesque act as he collapsed fully on top of Christopher. What remained of Christopher's dignity was obliterated in that instant, leaving him tainted in ways he could never erase. His scream echoed so loudly it drowned out everything else, a cry not just of pain, but of shame, so deep it would follow him forever. When the officers pulled him free, he was wild, thrashing, his voice hoarse. He turned on me, eyes burning with hate and humiliation. "Rebecca, how could you do this to me? I brought the money, I came here to save you, and you betrayed me with him. I am your husband. I am a man. How could you let this happen?" He shook, spitting rage, his voice rising into hysteria, as if I had been the one who chained him down. In truth, for a moment, I had considered aligning myself with Victor, letting him break Christopher as punishment for years of lies. But now, with police surrounding us and Victor bleeding on the ground, I would never admit it. Instead, I let madness fuel my performance. I screamed like a woman unhinged, grabbing Christopher's hair and slapping him hard across the face. The sound cracked through the warehouse. "You brought this on us," I shouted, my tears blurring the world. "You betrayed me. You brought your mistress into our marriage, and when death stared us in the face, you chose her over me. If I had not pretended, if I had not fought back, I would already be dead. And now you dare to blame me." My palm struck him again, the sting ringing through my arm. While Victor turned his back, I risked my life to save you and Olivia, and still you betray me. "You disgusting coward." Another slap landed, his face swelling under the blows, blood staining his lip. He staggered, unable to strike back, his pride in tatters. "You are too weak," I roared. "A man who lets himself be pinned down, humiliated, degraded, and then dares to blame me for his shame. You are filth, Christopher. You are nothing." I struck him again and again until the officers finally pulled me back. I collapsed into the arms of the female officer, sobbing brokenly. My voice shook as I whispered, "Why did I ever deserve this? What sin did I commit to end up married to such a man?" My tears fell hot onto her uniform, and she held me steady as if I were fragile glass. Around us, Christopher screamed. Olivia whimpered and Victor groaned on the floor. But for the first time, I felt strangely free. I had survived. I had exposed Christopher for what he truly was. And though my heart was shattered, there was a fierce pride burning in my chest. For more than a decade, Christopher Evans and I had been bound together, our families tied in friendship as well as business. I had believed that history, loyalty, and shared roots meant something unshakable. Yet in the abandoned warehouse in Kansas City, he chose another woman over me, leaving me to face death alone. I fought for my own survival, and in a moment of reckless courage, I even tried to save him. But when the dust settled, he blamed me. I had been cut, humiliated, scarred by Victor Hayes' hands, yet Christopher screamed as if he were the only victim. Tears streamed down my face as I pulled my blouse aside, revealing the crimson stain spreading across my stomach, and I deliberately showed the bruises Victor had left across my chest. The officers and bystanders saw that I had suffered too, that I was not some schemer, but a woman who had been dragged through hell. If I had not acted, if I had not clawed my way out of the nightmare, I would already be dead. Christopher tried to defend himself, his voice hoarse and desperate. "Rebecca, you don't understand. Choosing Olivia was a trick, a strategy. I planned to rescue you after Victor released her. I could never abandon you." His words rang hollow. I slapped him hard, the sound cracking through the air. A strategy. Why was Olivia the only one worth saving? Why couldn't I be the decoy? Why couldn't I be the one you fought for first? Why was I left for dead while you pretended it was all part of your plan? Don't lie to me, Christopher. The knife was already at my throat. You chose her, and you condemned me. My anger boiled over, and before he could speak again, I kicked him with every ounce of strength I had, my foot connecting with his bruised and humiliated body. He collapsed, his eyes rolling back as he fainted on the floor. The truth was undeniable. Christopher Evans, the heir who had always carried himself like royalty, had revealed to everyone that he was not a man of courage, but of weakness. He had abandoned his wife to save his mistress, and there was no redemption for that. The police questioned me, their eyes sharp, but I knew the law was a thin line I had barely avoided crossing. They recognized I had been the victim, that my actions had been desperate measures of survival. In the end, I was told I would face no charges, only a modest payment for Olivia Parker's medical bills. The irony of compensating my husband's mistress nearly broke me with laughter. Christopher's parents, Robert and Margaret Evans, saw their son's shame as unbearable. They whispered that I had provoked Victor, that I had somehow orchestrated the humiliation their beloved son endured. Parents will always shield their child, but in doing so, they shattered what remained between our families. The partnership collapsed, the friendship dissolved. My marriage to Christopher ended not with reconciliation, but with a cold finality. He was wheeled into Jackson County Courthouse, in a chair, his mother pushing him silently forward to sign the divorce papers. That image of the man who once stood so high, now reduced to a broken shadow, would stay with me forever. We had been childhood companions, and now we were sworn enemies. What Victor had done left Christopher scarred beyond repair. The police kept their reports quiet. My family refused to speak, and to outsiders, it was only whispered that the Evans family had endured a kidnapping scandal. The details of what had truly happened were buried, but secrets have a way of rotting in the dark. Not long after Christopher threw himself into a spectacle meant to erase his shame, he married Olivia Parker in a lavish ceremony in Kansas City, banners of white roses and champagne towers meant to disguise the rot beneath. He even had the audacity to send me an invitation as if I could stand in the pews and smile while he married the woman who had once pretended to be my friend. I tossed the invitation into the fire. My family had already shifted our investments overseas, cutting all ties with the Evans family. I buried myself in work, ignoring their provocation. Perhaps it was my silence that made them bold. Soon false stories appeared online, painting me as the cold and calculating wife in a loveless marriage of convenience. Olivia was cast as the true love, the selfless woman who risked her life to save Christopher. They twisted the narrative, turning betrayal into romance, adultery into destiny. To those who did not know the truth, they looked like star-crossed lovers, finally united, while I was branded the bitter villainess left behind. I read the headlines from abroad, shaking my head at the lies, refusing to be dragged into their theater. Let the world believe what it wanted. I had no intention of wasting my life fighting ghosts, yet fate had its own design. While Christopher and Olivia jetted off on a world honeymoon, the man they had tried to erase returned in a storm. Victor Hayes, alive and unbroken, unleashed a confession that detonated across the media. He told the police that Christopher had been his lover since college, that their relationship had been hidden behind the facade of my marriage. He claimed Christopher had married me only to preserve appearances to secure the blessing of two wealthy families, while he carried on his secret with Victor. The kidnapping, he said, had not been a simple vendetta, but a collision of love, betrayal, and rage. I read his words in disbelief, my pulse racing. Victor declared that Christopher had begged him to eliminate me, that I was nothing more than an obstacle to a hidden bond that stretched back years. He described me as the wealthy heiress chosen to serve as cover, a wife of convenience, while the real marriage played out in shadows. The revelation shook Kansas City to its core. Business circles whispered, neighbors gossiped, and the Evans family faced a humiliation that could no longer be buried. For me, it was confirmation of every scar, every bruise, every broken promise. Christopher had never truly chosen me, not in marriage, not in love, not even in the face of death. And yet, strangely, I felt no desire for revenge. I had already survived the fire, and I had no need to strike the ashes. Let them live in the chaos they created. Let Christopher and Olivia wrap themselves in the illusion of true love, while Victor dragged their secrets into the light. I had my freedom, my dignity, and the unshakable knowledge that I had endured what should have killed me. That was enough. In the years that followed, the fractures in my marriage widened until they were impossible to ignore. I could not give Christopher Evans the child he wanted, and Olivia Parker pressed her advantage, weaving herself deeper into his life with calculated seduction. To him, the idea of another womb, another vessel, seemed perfectly acceptable. His love became an empty performance, his loyalty a mask. Their affair grew bolder until it could no longer be denied. When I confronted the betrayal, Christopher did not retreat. Instead, he conspired with Victor Hayes, who had already been ruined financially, to end me. The kidnapping had never been a test of loyalty, never a matter of choosing between me and Olivia. It was always meant to be my death. Christopher believed that once I was gone, his words would be law. He thought he could spin the story, hush the questions, and run away with Olivia, while Victor disappeared into the shadows with cash in hand. But he underestimated me, and he underestimated the depth of Victor's fury. When the plan unfolded, Victor began to realize that Christopher was not simply playing a game. He saw the way Christopher looked at Olivia, the way his eyes clung to her. My words sliced through the chaos, planting doubts Victor could not ignore. What if Christopher's true intent was to sacrifice us both, erase the evidence, and escape with Olivia? The suspicion ignited Victor's rage. He had been betrayed by the man he once trusted. In a fit of violent fury, Victor turned on Christopher, assaulting him with brutal cruelty. If the police had not stormed the warehouse, none of us would have walked away alive. The scandal was explosive. Before investigators could contain the case, whispers flooded the internet. The Evans family scrambled to bury the details, but the truth seeped out in fragments that refused to die. Christopher, desperate to save face, sent me message after message. He called, he pleaded, swearing that Victor had fabricated everything. He insisted there had never been any intimacy between them, that Victor was slandering him. He begged me to explain, but I refused. My family refused. Why would I walk willingly into the presence of a man with a shattered psyche and a history of lies? What protection would I have if he turned on me again? He wanted me to stand at his side, to lend the weight of my voice as the victim in order to quiet the storm. Without direct proof of his alliance with Victor, my testimony was the one weapon he could use to soothe the public. But why should I protect the man who had left me to die? Why should I shield him when he had betrayed me, humiliated me, and treated my life as expendable? I had been a loyal wife. I had given him my youth, my trust, and my devotion. Even when I discovered his affair, I offered him an amicable divorce. Yet he refused, clinging to me while indulging in Olivia, weaving his lies until the truth suffocated. In that warehouse, when given the chance to save one life, he chose hers. I would never forget that. His arrogance blinded him. He thought Victor's greed outweighed his wrath, that the man would never act. He thought the threat of violence was only theater. He did not call the police. He did not hire protection. He came alone, confident in his delusion of control. Had Victor's temper not spiraled, had a secretary not alerted law enforcement, I would not be alive to tell the story. And now, in his bitterness, Christopher blamed me for everything. In his mind, I was the reason Victor's hands had broken his pride, the reason his humiliation could not be buried. Olivia, too, nursed her own resentment, glaring at me as though I had orchestrated her downfall. And Victor, rotting in custody, hated me for surviving. Between them stood a cheating husband, a disgraced rival, and a shameless mistress, all tied together by their own greed and cowardice. I had no reason to pity them. I decided instead to act first, to burn the entire stage before they could write me into another tragedy. The rumors of Christopher's entanglement with Victor were messy and uncertain, but I knew the truth. They were never lovers. Victor's assault had been an eruption of rage, not passion. Still, the damage was done. Christopher could never escape the shadow of that humiliation. He seethed with hatred. From behind bars, he pulled strings, paying other inmates to torment Victor. He thought cruelty would erase the memory of his shame. I watched from afar, silent and calculating. If Victor was to suffer, I would ensure his pain carved the Evans name deeper into ruin. I whispered through intermediaries, feeding the rumor that every lash, every beating was orchestrated by Christopher himself. As Victor broke under the strain, I ensured he was reminded again and again that his torment was not random, that it was engineered by the man who had betrayed him. The prison walls could not contain the venom. Victor grew gaunt and twisted, consumed by thoughts of revenge. And I stood outside untouched, knowing that the three of them had destroyed one another, each blinded by lust, greed, and hatred. All I had to do was nudge the pieces into place, and the collapse was inevitable. I had once been a wife who believed in family ties, in loyalty, in the promises whispered beneath vows. Now I was something else entirely. They had tried to erase me, to make me a footnote in their sordid tale. Instead, I became the author of its ending. When people lose everything, their emotions tend to swing to extremes. It did not take long for Victor Hayes to follow the very path I had laid out for him, declaring to the public that he and Christopher Evans shared a special bond. The whispers of a scandalous love affair at the top of society became the favorite subject for gossip columns and late-night talk shows. Even though the Kansas City Police Department issued statements and the Evans family spent fortunes to deny it, the public only believed what it wanted to believe. At first, I fueled the fire myself, posting anonymously to stir the waters, but soon the internet no longer needed my hand. Strangers dug through old photos of Christopher and Victor, twisted their words, bent facts, until falsehood seemed logical. They turned the absurd into the believable, stitching together fragments until the story of a secret romance became irresistible. Some fans even began shipping them, celebrating the scandal, as if it were some great forbidden love. Victor encouraged it shamelessly. He wrote online like a novelist, each post another salacious tale about his history with Christopher, each exaggeration inflaming the gossip. His parents even marched into the Evans offices, tears streaking their cheeks, calling Christopher their daughter-in-law, demanding he save their son. The scene was so outrageous it rivaled any soap opera. Every day, new trending headlines surfaced. Olivia Parker could not escape either. Once she had flaunted her marriage and mocked others, parading her triumph. Now she was dragged mercilessly, mocked as the wife of a man painted as gay, laughed at for being reduced to a surrogate whose only purpose was to bear a child. Even worse, the same fans who adored the so-called true love between Victor and Christopher condemned her as the intruder who had destroyed a pure romance. Within less than a year, the woman who once basked in high society's favor had become its punchline. The pressure broke her composure. Doubt began gnawing at her. She wondered if she had been nothing but a pawn, a cover for Christopher's hidden life. She lived suspicious of both men and women alike. Christopher could barely look at her. Every time he did, he saw Victor's face looming over him, replaying that night of humiliation in the warehouse. Divorce would have been easy, but Olivia was pregnant, and so they stayed shackled together, trapped in daily arguments, partners turned enemies under one roof. I, the discarded wife, carried my own scars, but compared to their downfall, I was suddenly the sympathetic figure. Though some still mocked me, far more people pitied me. They bought our family's products, offering encouragement, telling me to keep moving forward, praying I would find happiness free of that wretched man. Meanwhile, the Evans empire staggered. Stock prices plummeted, projects collapsed, and one by one they were forced to sell assets to my family. The scandal stretched on for months. By the time it began to quiet, my fortune had grown stronger while theirs had withered. They were no longer the dominant force in Kansas City, but a weakened house struggling to cling to third or fourth place. I immersed myself in business, while the next time Christopher's name reached me, it was in the form of prison records. He had been reduced to laboring as an inmate worker. The world is wide and nothing is impossible. Christopher and Olivia proved that the ridiculous could become reality. Not long after Olivia gave birth to a baby boy, Christopher thought at last he had an heir to soothe his broken pride. But when the blood test came back, the baby's type was B. Both Christopher and Olivia were type O. 2 O's cannot make a B. The truth was merciless. The boy was not Christopher's son. Before he could even taste the joy of fatherhood, he realized he had been made a fool, raising another man's child. Desperate, he ordered a DNA test, comparing the baby to Victor Hayes. The result struck like lightning. The child was Victor's. If the internet ever discovered this, they would have spun an even more lurid tale that the two men shared a woman to conceive a child, a twisted family of scandal. For Christopher, however, it was not entertainment. It was betrayal layered upon humiliation. He knew he had never shared love with Victor, but now the woman he clung to, the mistress he had sacrificed me for, had borne Victor's child. The realization twisted his mind until he was convinced the two had conspired against him, setting a trap that left him wearing the crown of a fool. Olivia's world collapsed too. Christopher's fury turned physical. His hand struck her in blind rage, leaving her shaken and terrified. Only then did she remember those nights when she had slipped away to private parties, desperate for release, careless of consequence. In those reckless hours, she had sealed her own fate. Now, within the walls of their fractured home, suspicion and hatred consumed them. The man who once cast me aside to save her now despised her more than anyone. The woman who once gloated in victory lived in fear of the man she thought she had won. And above them both the shadow of Victor Hayes loomed, his presence etched forever into their downfall. I watched from a distance, detached yet strangely at peace. They had written the script of my suffering, but I had survived and rewritten the ending. Christopher and Olivia were chained together by their own choices, drowning in rumors and betrayals, while Victor, once my tormentor, had been reduced to a symbol of their disgrace. And I, Rebecca Moore, walked free, carrying nothing of their shame, only the hard-won strength of a woman who had endured, who had been broken, and still risen again. At one of those parties blurred by alcohol and reckless laughter, Olivia Parker crossed a line she would never admit to. The nights had been chaotic, filled with shallow conversations and careless touches so tangled that even she could not remember with certainty who she had been with. But fate had its own cruel way of revealing truth. Despite precautions, she carried a child, and the father was not Christopher Evans, but Victor Hayes, the very man who had once tried to destroy them. Victor had never imagined that the wife of his sworn enemy would bear his child. Christopher refused to believe it. He raged at the humiliation Victor had inflicted upon him in that warehouse, and at the mockery that now followed him everywhere. His fury broke loose one night, when the truth was undeniable. In blind rage, he hurled Olivia and the baby from an upstairs landing. Olivia's instincts as a mother flared, and she shielded the infant as best she could. They struck the grass below, sparing the boy's life, with only minor injuries. Olivia was not so fortunate. Her face was ruined, her leg shattered, and whatever beauty she once wielded as a weapon vanished in an instant. The public that had followed their scandal now turned merciless. Even though she accepted hush money to write letters of forgiveness, no one would forgive Christopher. The tide of opinion would not be controlled. Christopher was sentenced to 3 years. His family tried to maneuver him into a cushioned prison, but the public demanded justice, and so he was delivered into the very same penitentiary where Victor Hayes was serving his time. I do not know what happened between them behind those walls, and I do not care. Christopher, Victor, and Olivia could keep twisting in their poison triangle for all eternity, as long as they left me out of it. I, Rebecca Moore, chose to memorialize them, only in writing a chronicle of their downfall that I shared from afar. From Christopher's point of view, the story was different. We had grown up together, childhood companions bound by years that should have forged love. Instead, he grew tired of me, weary of a marriage that felt too long and too certain. When Olivia appeared before him, he did not resist. At first, it was amusement, a distraction, but he never planned to divorce me. In his arrogance, he believed I could never live without him, that I would cling to him no matter what. Even when I caught him with Olivia, he would not let go. He thought he could play both sides, that my devotion would never crack. When Victor kidnapped us both, Christopher was not afraid. In his mind, Victor was a failure, a ruined man who would never truly harm us. He arrived at that warehouse alone, convinced he could outwit Victor with nothing more than money and charm. When Victor demanded he choose who to save, Christopher treated it as a farce. To him, the decision was easy. Olivia was pregnant, bruised, and pitiful. He thought saving her first would appear noble. He thought I, as his wife, would understand that I would wait patiently while he played the hero. He believed he could have us both back alive, that he could rescue me the moment Victor released Olivia. It was in his mind a flawless plan. But I was not the obedient wife he had written in his script. In my rage, I demanded Victor strike him, and to Christopher's horror, Victor obeyed. For the first time, he discovered that his strength meant nothing against Victor's fury. He was humiliated, beaten, stripped of the illusion of power. He claimed later that when I turned on him with words and fists, I revealed my cruelty. But deep down, he knew the truth. He had chosen another woman's life over mine, and I was the one who bore the knife at my throat. Afterward, he told himself I had betrayed him, that my resistance had ruined everything. He said if I had been silent, if I had simply endured, He could have saved us all. That was the story he told himself to mask his shame. Divorce, when it came, was a relief to him. He could no longer look at me without remembering the night Victor broke him. He married Olivia partly because she was carrying what he believed to be his child, and partly because she had witnessed his humiliation. By making her his wife, he thought she would be bound by loyalty, unable to expose the truth. He never imagined that Victor would keep feeding the flames, spreading stories of a hidden romance between them. He never imagined that strangers online would weave entire tales from blurry photographs and half-heard whispers. Christopher became a laughingstock. He boiled with resentment, but he had no weapon to fight back. People might doubt the idea that he had plotted to kill me, but they never doubted the sordid possibility of a hidden affair with Victor. They spun fantasies of dominance and submission, of passion and revenge, all from scraps of gossip. He was left helpless, a man mocked by the world, caged by rumors he could not dispel. He raged at me, at Olivia, at Victor, but none of it mattered anymore. The narrative had escaped his hands. He had once believed he controlled the story, that everyone danced to his script. Now he lived as nothing more than a character in mine. And me, I had survived. I had endured betrayal, humiliation, and the edge of death itself, and yet I was free. They had chained themselves together in hatred and disgrace. I had no need to strike them further. Their ruin was the only justice I required. The world is insane, but nothing drove me closer to madness than discovering that Olivia Parker was carrying Victor Hayes' child. She called it an accident, begged Christopher Evans to forgive her, but he could not hear a word. The rage inside him boiled until one night he shoved her and the baby from an upstairs landing. His first thought as they fell was that the house was too short, that the fall would not finish them. The infant survived with only bruises thanks to the grass, but Olivia's life was shattered. Her face was ruined, one leg broken beyond repair, and the glamorous mistress who once paraded her beauty now lived as a scarred cripple. The internet had already feasted on their scandal, and even though she signed letters of forgiveness with money in her pocket, public outrage would not quiet. Christopher was sentenced to 3 years in prison. His family tried to maneuver him into a lenient facility, but the public would not allow it. Under scrutiny, he was placed in the same penitentiary as Victor Hayes. What happened between them behind those walls I never knew, and I did not want to know. It was enough that the three of them, Christopher, Victor, and Olivia, remained tangled together in their pit of ruin, far away from me. Sometimes Christopher admitted in his own bitter recollections that he wondered if things might have been different had he never touched Olivia. He remembered our childhood, how long our love had lasted, and in weak moments he missed me, but he could not turn back time. He told himself that from the beginning, he should have destroyed both Olivia and Victor rather than let them unravel his life. In prison, he was haunted daily. On his first morning in the showers, inmates surrounded him laughing, calling him Victor's wife, mocking him as if he belonged to them all. The humiliation burned deeper than any wound Victor had left on his body. He thought of me, Rebecca Moore, and wondered what might have been had he stayed loyal. But the thought only twisted the knife. There are no second chances. From Olivia's side, the story was different. She never believed in men, never believed in true love. She only trusted money. When she saw Christopher beginning to lose control of himself, she climbed into his bed. She played obedient, served him with every trick she had, and it worked. He was addicted to her, but she knew he never stopped carrying me in his heart. It did not matter. She wanted money and status, not love. She never meant to carry his child, but when she realized she was pregnant, she clung tighter. She thought she could hold her place until she delivered. She did not expect to be swept into a kidnapping, forced to stand between life and death. When Christopher chose her that night, she breathed relief, secretly thanking fate for sparing her. In her heart, she thought she owed me nothing more than burning paper offerings once I was gone. She never imagined I would turn black, that I would ally with Victor to bring her down. After the divorce, she became the wife. She relished the title, but before she could taste the full sweetness, Victor poisoned everything. He told the world that he and Christopher were lovers, that the kidnapping was a plot to murder me and seize my inheritance. Olivia did not know what to believe. Some days she convinced herself it was all lies. Other days, the analysis online seemed too convincing to dismiss. The criticism crushed her. The hormones of pregnancy only magnified her unrest. Every time she looked at Christopher, she saw a two-faced man. She could no longer play obedient mistress. Their house filled with fights. At first she thought she would stay until the baby was born, and then leave unwilling to remain the laughingstock of society. But the child turned out not to be Christopher's at all. It was Victor's. Olivia could not even recall the night clearly. She had been drunk at a party, careless, reckless. She did not remember being with Victor, but the test was undeniable. She thought bitterly that she was only a mistress, not a saint. And if Christopher could stray to his wife, why could she not find her pleasures? In her drunken haze, she had sealed her fate. When Christopher discovered the truth, his rage drove him to push her down the stairs. Afterward, she took the money left him and went abroad for surgery. Her face was rebuilt, but her leg never healed, leaving her crippled. She accepted it, telling herself she was still beautiful enough to play the mistress. She became one again, attached to wealthy men, living as she always had, chasing money rather than love. Life was not glorious, but it was stable. When Christopher and Victor left prison, they both sought her out. One demanded the child, the other seethed at the betrayal. She was exhausted by them both. In the end, she chose the protection of a crime boss, a dangerous man, but one who kept them away. As for the child, she had abandoned him long ago at an orphanage. She did not know where he was now and did not care. She told herself that she, Christopher, and Victor were all rotten to the core and had no right to drag the boy into their misery. She had no heart for motherhood. She did not want children. Yet she confessed one small hope. If the boy ever grew up and met a good woman like Rebecca Moore, he should learn to cherish her. Thanks for listening. Be sure to subscribe so you don't miss the next videos.